this Transfiguration Day, this is one of the great feasts of the church. We hear it, the readings today, we hear them twice a year. The last Sunday after Epiphany, so kind of like late January, and again on August 6th, which we transferred to today. August 6th, that's an oddly specific date. It's not tied to back-to-school sales or tax breaks. It probably comes from the dedication of the church, of a church in Mount Tabor in the 5th or 6th century. And like so many things in our church, once it started, the tradition stuck. Now, I've spoken all summer about our struggle to see more clearly, love more dearly, follow more nearly. And that can be hard to do when we're so focused on the shiny things that we miss the real treasure. Take, for example, this gospel story of the Transfiguration. In it, the disciples saw Jesus' glory. But I have to ask, did Jesus actually become different, or did the disciples? Could the transformation or the Transfiguration also be about transformation? Could it be I've been talking about learning to see what it is that is already present? Yes, I have. I've talked about hidden treasure across the summer, hidden grace, hidden seeds, hidden love. It's great to experience them. It's even better when you learn to see how God is working through those in your life. Starting to see again, or just starting to see, requires some kind of adjustment usually. Moses veils his face because the people cannot yet bear the reflected glory. And Peter spends the rest of his life trying to describe glory that no veil could hide. I wonder how often we are all both Moses and Peter at different times. Like Moses, Peter never forgot the moment. Years later, that we heard in that second letter of Peter, decades after the event, Peter doesn't say, well, we had a good old time up there. No, he says that they were witnesses to Jesus' majesty. That glimpse, that experience became the lens through which he understood everything else. Sound familiar? Christians have reflected on this story in different ways over the centuries. In the Western church, we've often emphasized the Transfiguration reveals who Jesus truly was before he walks to the cross. And that's certainly true. But the Eastern church has often asked another question too. What does this moment reveal about what humanity is called to become? If Christ's glory shines through his humanity, then perhaps the Transfiguration isn't really about, or just only about, Christ. Perhaps it's also about God's intention for us to be transformed into the likeness of God. Suddenly, the story isn't just looking at Jesus. It's about learning to see ourselves, our neighbors, and the whole world through God's eyes. That Christian life, it is learning to see. And what we behold slowly shapes the people we become, even as we share close spaces with others. I was reminded of a story that brings this into focus. It was written by Dr. Wayne Dyer in the book, Your Sacred Self. So listen to this. In a mother's womb were two babies. One asked the other, "Do you believe in life after delivery?" The other replied, "Why, of course. There has to be something after delivery. Maybe we're here to prepare ourselves for what we will be later." "Nonsense," says the first. "There's no life after delivery. What kind of life would that be?" The second said, "I don't know, but maybe there will be more light than we have here." Maybe we'll walk with our legs and eat with our mouths. Maybe we'll have other senses we can't understand now. And the second replied, that is absurd. Walking is impossible. And eating with our mouths? Ridiculous. The umbilical cord supplies nutrition and everything we need. And besides, the umbilical cord is so short. Life after delivery is to be logically excluded. The second insisted, well, I think there is something, and maybe it's different than it is here. Maybe we don't need this physical cord anymore. First replies, nonsense. And moreover, if there is life, then why has no one ever come back from there? Delivery is the end of life. And in the after delivery, there's nothing but darkness and silence and oblivion. It takes us nowhere. Well, I don't know, said the second, but certainly we'll meet Mother, and she'll take care of us. The first replies, Mother? There we go again. You actually believe in Mother? That's laughable. If Mother exists, where is she now? The second said, she's all around us. We're surrounded by her. We are of her. It is in her that we live. Without her, this world would not and could not exist. Said the first, well, I don't see her, so it's only logical she doesn't exist. To which the second replied, sometimes when you're in silence and you focus and you really listen, you can perceive her presence and you can hear her loving voice calling down from above. Isn't that remarkable? Both babies have reason, for some reason. Both are smart. Both are intelligent. Both are sincere. Both are reasoning from the only world they've ever known. But one of them cannot imagine a reality larger than the only reality they know. And I don't blame them one iota. For every objection is logical. Every counter-argument sounds like us. But we aren't babies in the womb. We have the ability to see both sides of this debate. The question is, can we meet both of them at their point of understanding and love them anyway? Because to both babies in the womb, walking is impossible. Eating through a mouth, impossible. Hanging out with mom, impossible. Yet every one of those impossibilities turns out to be true. Isn't that like Moses, the reluctant prophet, who wasn't really sure about God? Isn't that like Peter, who betrayed the same person he said he loved? Isn't that like all the disciples? Isn't that like us? The babies are already inside the reality they're trying to prove exists. So when the second child says, we are surrounded by her, that echoes the words of Paul as he stood in Athens and said, in him we live and move and have our being. The babies, they were surrounded by a mother they couldn't imagine. We are surrounded by the very God we sometimes wonder is absent. But recognizing that we are surrounded by a Creator is itself a kind of transfiguration. In this way, the deepest truths of God are simply larger than our current imagination. The Feast of the Transfiguration reminds us and invites us to see. Too often we ask God to change our circumstances. God, get me out of this mess, please. How many prayers we thought God didn't answer were actually moments when God was trying to quietly teach us to see differently. The miracle isn't that God is suddenly present when we see. The miracle is that we finally begin to recognize that presence surrounding us all along. This past week, Travis and I visited friends up in western North Carolina. Beauty. What beauty in that area. What scars in that area. See, some of you remember that Hurricane Helene devastated that region just 2 years ago next month. Along our many hikes, I witnessed impacts of that destruction. But I also recognized that new growth was occurring, even in old growth forests that are considered steady state. The mountains, they were already beautiful. Christ was already glorious. Jesus, God, was already present. I simply began to see what had always been there. The mountains hadn't changed, but I had. That's what we experience with others. That's what we experience with grief. Grief has a strange way of teaching us to see what mattered all along. And it's how Christ has looked at us all along, thankfully. And what is the result of this transfiguration? Well, the clouds lifted. Moses and Elijah disappeared. All the dazzling lights faded like lightning bugs as dusk turns over to night. At that moment, all goes quiet. And Luke simply says, Jesus was found alone. He was enough on the mountain. He would be enough in Jerusalem. He would be enough at the cross. He would be enough in the empty tomb. And he is enough when we return to ordinary life today. Because transfiguration was certainly about revealing the glory of Jesus. But it's also about teaching us to recognize the glory that's walking beside us all along. Maybe this week, you can ask God for the gift of perception rather than merely intervention. Because the miracle isn't that God suddenly becomes more present. The miracle is that by God's grace, we begin to recognize that presence has been surrounding us all along. Amen.